And I just noticed, I think she said Babel, I'm going to say Babel. You can say it any way you want. I might even switch off during the sermon between Babel and Babel. I wanted to remind you that on the way out, you're going to receive a quiz on the sermon. And if you, just for the fun, and take it home, and if you get all 10 right, I'll buy you a free coffee and donut this morning right after church. And if you miss more than 5, you need to buy coffee and donuts for all 600 people next week, okay? So listen up. So today we will look at the tale of two towers. And as we do, we're going to see how the Tower of Babel and Calvary are connected at the end of the message. So we're going to start by asking the question, when did the event of the Tower of Babel happen? And this is important because all of these events are historical and geographical, and we want to remember that. So look at this slide. It's a little reminder of the first 5 events of Genesis. We start with creation, and then we get to Adam and Eve and the fall into sin. And then we get to Cain and Abel, a very sad episode about sin in the world. And then we get to Noah and the flood, another big episode that has to do with God's punishment of sin. And then after Noah and the flood, we get to our event, the Tower of Babel. Now, in this next slide, here are some of Bo's ballpark dating calculations. We know that the creation occurred at minimum of 4,000 years BC. But starting back with David and going to Moses, we're going backwards in time. You can see how the flood probably occurred at about 2,350 BC. Now, coming back down, the Tower of Babel probably happened only about 100 or 150 years after the great flood of Noah. And Abraham lived only about 100 or 150 years after the Tower of Babel. So all of these events are crunched into about 300 years. And then Moses, 800 years later, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, wrote the book of Genesis in about 1400 BC, including the event that we're going to study today, the Tower of Babel. Now, next we should learn a little bit about the geography of the Tower of Babel. Verse 2 says that as men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. Now, Shinar refers to southern Babylonia, as we see on the map. We think that the Tower of Babel happened in this ancient map where the city of Babylon is located. But please also notice at the bottom of the map, Ur of the Chaldees. That's where Abraham was from. And so, if I'm not mistaken, when God called Abraham from Ur, he may have walked right by the ruins of the Tower of Babel on his way up to Haran. So, in terms of today's geography, we are talking about the country of Iraq. By the way, something very interesting happened. After the 9:30 service, 2 ladies came up to me, and I knew they were from the Middle East. I didn't know where, and I said, "Where are you from?" And they said, "Iraq." And so they were saying, "We know all about what you were telling people." So archaeologists believe that the Tower of Babel was constructed either at the small city of Babel, or just south of it, Al-Hilla, is probably where the ruins of the Tower of Babel are located in today's Iraq. And now, before getting into the details of the story, I found some interesting details about the text that I'd like to share with you. Here's the first one. We have the only ziggurat mentioned in the whole Bible right in front of us in verse 4, because it says, in addition to building a city, they wanted to build a tower that reaches to the heavens. Bible scholars and archaeologists are agreed that these buildings, these towers, are the ones that later became known as ziggurats. And they're all over southern Iraq in today's geography. Here's another interesting thing. Not only do we have ziggurats, we also have an interesting comment by Moses about building materials. Look at verse 3. He says that they said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." And then Moses adds this, and it's just kind of strange. They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar, as if to say, can you imagine that? The reason Moses added this is because over in Israel, where his audience was, the only thing they had to build with were rocks, stone, cut stone. That's how they build buildings over in Palestine, in Israel. But in Babylonia, very few stones, very few rocks. It's that wide open space between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. No rocks there. And so they baked bricks and built their buildings in that way. So Moses is simply letting his people know in the audience in Israel, you're never going to believe this. They don't build with stones. They use bricks and mortar there. So here's one more interesting detail of the text, and it's that we get to see an anthropomorphism. And that is simply explaining something about God in human terms. That's all it means. But it comes up in these verses. It says, but the Lord came down to see the city. And then in verse 7, God himself says, let us go down and confuse. So this is an anthropomorphism because it's explaining something about God in human terms. Because God doesn't have to go anywhere to find something out. He's all-powerful, all-knowing, and present everywhere. So when it says that the Lord came down to see something, it just means he was about to act. But Moses writes it in human terms, so we can understand. That's a beautiful anthropomorphism. One more interesting detail of this text has to do with a new beginning. And it is that the world goes from one language at the beginning of our story, and by the end of the story, there's either dozens or hundreds. We don't know how many people were involved here. And we also can see in verse 6 why God confused their languages or multiplied the languages. And in a minute, I'm going to explain the rebellion that was happening here. But for the moment, I want to explain. So the rebellion was happening in the building of the city and tower. And whenever a group of people all speak the same language and they're dead set on doing rebellion against God, their rebellion can grow because they can encourage each other because everybody understands each other. But God confused their languages to put a stop on their evil, so they couldn't continue going against his will, as I'll explain in just a minute. God miraculously gave them multiple languages to confuse the construction project. Now, we don't know exactly how this looked, but we did a little short video to show how when the languages are confused, it's really hard to do a construction project. So in this short video, the guy in the middle, when they switch languages, he's going to start talking in Spanish. Sarah on your left is going to start talking in Arabic. And Ravi on your right is going to start talking in Hindi. And nobody's going to understand anything. Let's watch. Okay, guys. We're almost half done with this tower. It's very exciting. Let's keep going. What do you say? Yay! We want to reach the heavens. Yes, we do.
And everyone will be impressed with us.
They will be bragging about us. It's going to be awesome. So let's get organized. Now, who's bringing the bricks today?
Oh, that would be me. We have hundreds ready to go.
Very good. How about the cement? We can order.
All ready, sir. We have enough for the day.
Okay, looks like we can really get to work. Ahora lo que quiero que ustedes hagan es digan a sus hombres que deben llevar los ladrillos y el cemento hacia arriba en la torre donde vamos a estar trabajando hoy. Háganlo pues.
انتظر ماذا تقول؟
मुझे कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा.
Pero ¿por qué no están haciendo lo que yo les mandé hacer?
هذا لا يمكن. أنا أستقيل.
No, ya va, no. Que no te
मैं तुम
vayas.
लोगों के साथ काम नहीं कर
No,
सकता.
por favor, que no se vayan. Oh, la torre. No vamos a poder construir la torre. Mi torre arruinado. So, maybe that's something like what happened. God produces multiple languages they can't understand. The construction project has to be stopped. Now, as the centuries went by, God continued to permit many new languages to come into being. So here's a little quiz for you. How many languages do you think are spoken on planet Earth today? A, B, C, or D? And don't feel bad, I didn't know until I looked it up. The answer is letter C, 7,300 languages. And these 7,300 languages remind us that as the Church of Jesus Christ, we want everybody in the world to get to have God's Word in their own language. And so there are two wonderful Christian ministries that their missionaries are dedicated to only one idea, translating the Bible into the rest of the 7,300 languages so that everybody can know Jesus as their Savior. I wanted to encourage you this week to look up, go to their websites, and learn a little bit more about languages and Bible translation, because it's such an important part of the ministry of our church, and it all stems from the Tower of Babel. Okay, now we are going to turn to the tale of two towers, and later we're going to consider the Tower of Calvary, but right now I'd like us to take a deep dive into the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel is all about human sin and rebellion and God's response to it. So, the first sin of these Babylonian builders was rebellion against God. They were defying God's directions. Here's what they were saying. Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower. Now look what it says. And not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. That was their goal. Now, in and of itself, there's no problem with building a city and a tower and hunkering down and enjoying urban life. Nothing wrong. Unless it's the exact opposite of what God had said they should do. So if you would go back with me to chapter 9, and we will be looking here at Noah and his sons and wives getting off of the ark, and God says to them, I want you guys to be fruitful and increase in number, and look what it says, I want you to fill the earth. In other words, as the generations grow, I want all of you who are growing numerically, I want you to keep spreading out. Now, we don't know exactly why God said that. My theory is this. God had built into planet Earth so many different types of wonderful places to live. He built mountains and hills and plains and coastal areas and deserts and tropical forests. He built all kinds of climates on planet Earth. And He was saying, I want you to go out and enjoy all of what I've created for you. So spread out. So now if we come back to our chapter 11, and we look at verse 4 again, now we can see the rebellion. God had told them, I want you to spread out, scatter, enjoy the whole earth. And they said to God, no, we're not going to spread out. We're going to stay right here. We're going to do what we want to do, not what you told us to do. And so this then is the rebellion of the people. And as you can imagine, this rebellion against God didn't turn out the way they had hoped. Because after the Lord confused their languages, they couldn't continue the construction project. And look what verses 8 and 9 say. So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth. So the rebellion didn't work. God's plan worked. And I like the way in verse 9 when Moses repeats it, he says, from there the Lord, it's like he's saying, by the way, did I mention that they were scattered all over the earth in spite of their rebellion? And so here we can see how when people defy God's will in their lives, it won't go as they planned. So now I'd like to give you 4 examples of how the rebellion at Babel is alive and well in our world today. Here's the first example. It is that God lovingly tells us that He's the only true God. There's not 2 gods, not 3, there's only one. And I'm all you need, humans. If you believe in me and worship me, you'll be happier than any other way of doing it. And yet humans rebel, right? The world religions have their own gods. Many people worship ancestral spirits. People worship virgins. They worship saints. They worship all these kinds of things. They worship Mother Earth. And in our own culture, sometimes we worship our possessions, our careers, our pastimes, and our comforts more than God Himself. And so the rebellion of Babel is alive and well in the idolatry of the world around us. Here's another example. God has made very clear what His will is for human sexuality and for marriage. He wants marriage to be between one man and one woman for the whole life, and He wants them to love each other with a sacrificial, committed love, a love in which they are supporting each other and looking for the best for each other. Yet humans rebel against God. Each of the types of relationships and marriage on the screen are examples of sinful human beings defying God and telling Him He can't tell us how to manage our sexuality or our relationships or our marriages. We'll define how we think they should be. More rebellion against God. Here's a third example, and it's delicate, but it's important. So God has made it very clear that He loves little babies in the womb from conception. He talks about it a lot in His Word. He says, I'm knitting them together in the womb. He says, I'm making them in my image. He says, I know these little children in the womb. He says, I love these little children in the womb. And in addition to that, he says, I've got plans for these little people in the womb. God says all that in his word. And so in God's mind, they are precious. But even when the baby is healthy and there is no threat to the mother's life, rebellious humans say, no, God, you're not right. That little baby is disposable. And there's nothing wrong with terminating his or her life. In this way, Babel's rebellion against God is rampant all around us. And I'd like to just give one more example. It's because there's lots of Babel rebellion in our world. God has made it very clear that he created our planet, our solar system, our galaxy, and our universe. He's also made it very clear that he created all forms of life, plant life, animal life, and human life. And he's made it very clear that he is the one who created all of this. And he makes it clear in his word that that's the case. And he does it this way because he wants all humans to be in awe of him as the creator of this amazing planet full of life. He wants all humans to say, wow, if God created this, we're going to love it, we're going to take care of it, and we're going to give him the glory. But since the 1850s, Darwinian evolution or secular evolution has said to God, no, you didn't, you silly little God. It all just came about accidentally over the last 15.8 billion years. We can explain the origin of the universe, origin of life, origin of humans without you. So also in this way, man defies or rebels against God. And I just want to add as a side note, I put Dr. Carl Werner there because he has done 14 videos to demonstrate that all 200 examples of the so-called ape-man fossils, they are all frauds, not just some of them. And so if you Google Dr. Carl Werner, if you're interested in learning more about how we are created by God, not evolved from apes, it's a great place to start. So now we're going to just briefly look at the second big sin related to the Tower of Babel, and it is the sin of egocentrism or self-centeredness. Look at verse 4 with me. They said, come, let us build ourselves a city so that we may make a name for ourselves. And so you can see the attitude of them. They were wanted to, it was all about them. They weren't concerned about their gracious God getting the glory. It wasn't about building a city that could serve the good of others. These Babylonian builders wanted to build a city for their own good, their own comfort, and their own glory. And this was the sin of egotism or self-centeredness and self-pride. But all of us, even those who are saved by the blood of Jesus, we also, with our old sinful nature, we struggle regularly with these sins of egotism. We often find ourselves looking out for number one and doing things with me in mind. But I want to remind us today from the Tower of Babel that all self-centeredness wreaks havoc in marriages. It sucks the joy out of families. It makes the workplace toxic instead of pleasant, and it causes unneeded tensions in our church life. This sin is the opposite of a humble servant attitude which the Holy Spirit works in our hearts. Look what St. Paul writes. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit like the builders at Babel, but in humility consider others better than yourselves, or in this case, more important. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also be interested in what is important to other people. And so here we have, of course, that this is the attitude Jesus had with respect to us. And it's the attitude which he is able to build into our lives with his forgiveness. So now in conclusion, very briefly, I'd like to get to comparing the Tower of Babel and the Tower of Calvary. And here we go. Babel was built by sinful men, and the tower on Calvary was orchestrated by God. Next, the motivation at the Tower of Babel was rebellion and self-centeredness, but the motivation at Calvary was grace and forgiveness, and the desire of a radically forgiving God wanting to forgive humans of all their sins. And then the next comparison is this, that Babel didn't reach to the heavens as planned. Do you remember that was the big idea? Hey, we're going to build a tower. It's going to reach to the heavens. Well, it didn't. But at Calvary, Jesus' sacrifice does reach to the heavens. And God the Father accepts his sacrifice. And on the basis of his sacrifice, you and I receive full and free forgiveness because of Jesus. Another comparison, Babel was an unfinished failure, and Calvary was a finished success. Do you remember Jesus' words? It is finished. And the result of Babel was that people were scattered as a punishment, but the result at Calvary was that people are gathered at the foot of the cross like we are today, rejoicing together as forgiven sinners, and then we are scattered or sent, but not as a punishment, but out of love for the people who do not yet know Jesus and his salvation. So, today we thank the Lord that though the Tower of Babel is just a heap of rubble somewhere in southern Iraq, the Tower of Calvary, its value and blessings will continue flowing into our lives for eternity. Amen.